Welcome to the deep dive. We take the material you shared with us and really dig in to extract the core knowledge, the key insights. We're your guides to what matters.
And today, yeah, we're diving into something pretty fascinating. It's based on the source you provided. The Bare-Knuckle Boxer's Companion, Learning How to Hit Hard and Train Tough. The authors are David Lindholm and Ulf Carlson Tada.
Okay, yeah, those authors immediately caught my eye. Lindholm, he's got this background in history, medieval archaeology, plus he's into historical European martial arts, HEMA.
Right. And then Carlson comes from a completely different angle, but equally deep. Decades in Japanese martial arts. Taito, trained in Japan.
Exactly. So you've got this blend, haven't you? The historical research side and the practical hands-on martial arts experience. That's quite a combo shaping their view.
It really is, and it lets them look at European bare-knuckle boxing not just as, like, some brutal old sport.
Which is how most people probably see it.
Yeah, probably, yeah. But they see it as a martial art, something with real historical depth, principles that might even still matter today.
So for this deep dive then, what's the plan? What are we hoping you, the listener, will kind of get out of this?
Well, the aim is to trace its history, where it came from in Europe, then look at some core techniques, the basics,
Okay.
how they trained, which sounds intense, and then think about, well, does any of this connect to modern self-defense?
Right. It's not just about, like, listing old fights. It's about understanding the actual art behind it.
Precisely, getting to the core principles.
Okay. So moving beyond just the rough and tumble image, appreciating the lineage. This should be good. Where do we start? History.
Let's start way back. The book takes us to ancient Greece and Rome. Seriously old stuff.
Like how old?
They talk about wall paintings from Santorini around 1500 BC, apparently showing young people boxing.
No way. 1500 BC.
Yeah, and maybe even with some kind of hand covering on the right hand. It's pretty amazing.
That's incredible. So it wasn't just fists back then either, necessarily.
Seems like it. And then you jump forward a bit, maybe 1000 BC, you've got Homer's Iliad.
Okay. The epic poems.
Right. And it describes hand-to-hand fighting, mentions something called hemontes.
Hemontes. What are those?
Basically leather straps wrapped around the hands, kind of like modern hand wraps, for support.
Okay. Stabilizing the wrist and knuckles.
Exactly. There's even a picture in the book, a bronze statue from the 1st century BC, and you can clearly see these wraps.
Wow. So even thousands of years ago, they knew you needed to protect your hands somehow when hitting. Fascinating.
Yeah.
How did society view boxing back then?
Well, in ancient Greece, it was pretty important. Boxing, wrestling, pankration, they were all part of educating young men. Big parts of the games.
Right, the Olympics and all that.
Yeah, and there's this interesting bit the book mentions from Socrates via Plato, talking about people with battered ears.
Battered ears.
Right.
Like cauliflower ear.
Probably. And some scholars think that might be a nod to the Spartans, who apparently liked boxing maybe more than the Athenians did.
Huh. Spartans. Makes sense. So the Greeks were definitely into it. What about the Romans?
The Romans too, yeah, but maybe differently, more as public entertainment, perhaps.
Like gladiatorial stuff?
Sort of in that vein. The book suggests wrestling might have been seen as more militarily practical for the Romans.
Why is that?
Well, think about it. Trying to punch someone wearing armor, probably not very effective.
Oh, yeah.
But grappling, controlling them, that works even if they're armored up. So wrestling had maybe more battlefield application.
That makes total sense. Okay, so ancient roots established. But then things get a bit murky in the medieval period, don't they?
Yeah, that's an interesting point the book makes. You look at medieval combat manuals, lots of wrestling, loads of it. But striking and kicking, less focus.
Which seems weird, right? Why would they stop punching?
Well, besides the armor issue we just mentioned, the authors suggest a couple of other things. Maybe wrestling is just safer to train.
Ah, okay. Like sparring with wrestling is less likely to cause serious injury than going at a bare knuckle.
Exactly. You have more control, less chance of broken bones, knockouts, all that, especially in just practice.
Good point. But does that mean striking just vanished completely in the Middle Ages?
Not entirely, no. The book clarifies this. If you look closely at some 15th century manuals, like from Ringek or Passion, you do find strikes mixed in with the wrestling.
Okay, so it's still there.
And importantly, Fiore de Liberi. He's a big name in medieval martial arts. He actually mentions boxers or pugilists in his 1409 book.
He does.
Yeah. Doesn't go into detail about how they fought, but he uses them as an example of skilled people. So bare-fisted fighting was clearly a known skill.
Right. recognized, even if it wasn't the main focus of the surviving manuals. So it bubbles under the surface, and then later on it comes back strong.
Exactly. Post-medieval era, you see this definite resurgence. Eventually, it leads to the formalized sport of bare-knuckle boxing. We start getting rules, minimal at first. Think James Figg, early 18th century.
Okay, this is the era people usually think of, right? The
Yeah.
big names, the long fights.
That's the one. But here's the twist the book highlights.
Yeah.
When gloves and stricter rules came in, late 19th, early 20th century, designed for safety, right?
Sure.
Ironically, it meant some of the old techniques got lost. Things like throws, kicks, even how you punched differently without gloves, they just weren't needed or allowed anymore.
Ah, so the very thing meant to regulate it also kind of changed it fundamentally.
Yeah.
Which leads us nicely into the techniques the book is trying to reconstruct.
Precisely. They're trying to understand that older way of fighting.
Okay, so how did they figure this out? Reconstructing techniques sounds tricky.
It is. They're very upfront about that. Their method was basically look at the old texts, the descriptions, then apply biomechanics. Does this movement make sense for the human body?
Right.
And then, crucially, try it out. Practical applications. See if it actually works. But they stress this is their interpretation, one perspective.
That's fair. Good scholarship. Okay, so technique number 1. The stance, the guard. What did that look like?
So, the guard. Similarities to modern boxing, but different too. Generally more upright and narrower.
Narrower. Why narrower? Modern boxing stances are often quite wide for power.
Good question. The book suggests it's mainly for mobility, evasion. Mendoza, a famous fighter, apparently said avoiding the hit is better than parrying it.
Okay, makes sense. Harder to hit a moving target.
Exactly. A narrower stance lets you move, angle off quicker. Now, some old pictures show wider stances, but the authors think those might be more, artistic license than precise depictions.
Maybe not always narrow, but the option was there for agility?
Yeah, a trade-off. Wider for power when you strike, maybe narrower when on guard. Adaptable.
Gotcha. Okay, stance covered. What about hitting? How do you punch without gloves and not break your hand? That seems like the big challenge.
Huge difference, yeah. The book really emphasizes hitting with the bottom part of the fist, the last 2 knuckles, basically.
What? The bottom 2. Not the first 2 like in modern boxing often.
Right, because hitting with the bottom 2 lines up the force better through the stronger bones of the hand, arm, shoulder. It protects those smaller, more fragile bones in the hand and wrist.
Ah, force distribution.
Exactly. With gloves, you can get away with landing differently because the padding absorbs some impact. Bare knuckle. You have to be precise or you risk injury. Palm strikes were also an option, apparently, for close range.
Makes sense. Precision over just brute force. Hand conditioning must have been vital then. We'll get to that. What about footwork?
Absolutely key. They quote an old swordmaster, Lichtenauer, "That which moves is alive, that which is still is dead."
Love that quote. Applies perfectly here.
Totally. So, quick, short steps, maintaining balance, being able to change direction fast, weight usually on the back leg and the guard for agility.
So you can move any direction easily.
Right. They talk about basic steps. Forward, back, sidestep, and something called the pass.
The pass.
Yeah, where one foot steps past the other. Not really for attacking during the step, more for quickly repositioning, resetting your base without getting stuck.
Okay, quick resets. Agility, angles, movement. Got it. So what were the main punches they actually threw?
The straight strike is fundamental, like a jab or a cross, but maybe thrown slightly differently. Key things. Aim beyond the target.
Through the target, yeah.
And pull the hand back super quick after impact. Hit hard, but don't leave it out there. Get it back fast.
Minimize vulnerability. Okay. What about hooks? Round punches.
Less favored as primary attacks, according to the book. Sort of like old fencing theory, the straight line is the quickest.
Direct path.
Yeah. And round strikes, hooks, they usually need more body movement, which can open you up more.
Right. Leaves you exposed if you miss.
Exactly. But they were used, especially as counterattacks or in close range. They make a distinction between a wild swing and a proper tight hook driven by body rotation.
So situational. Not the main weapon usually. Any other strikes?
Uppercut, yeah. Close in, rising punch, powered from the legs, fist angled about 45 degrees using those bottom knuckles again.
Makes sense.
Then there's the back fist, or chopper. Mostly used as a counter after you parry someone's punch, kind of flicking the knuckles down across their face.
Ouch.
And the backswing, if you throw a hook and miss, you can follow through, hitting with the bony underside of your forearm near the elbow. Use your hips for power.
Wow, using the forearm too. Resourceful. Now I have to ask, headbutts. Really?
Yep. Included in the analysis, key things. Be close, keep your head stable, step in with your whole body weight, hit with the hardest part of your forehead, right at the top.
Not something you practice lightly, I imagine.
Definitely not. They even mention side and backward headbutts shown in some old German manuals.
Wild. Okay, so it wasn't just punching. Were there throws and trips, too? The title mentions more than just hitting.
Absolutely. Throws and trips were definitely part of it.
Yeah.
They describe the trip, basically. Step behind their lead foot, then push them over your leg.
Simple but effective.
And the counter is just as simple. Step back, widen your stance, harder to push over.
Makes sense. Any other throws?
Yeah, the cross buttock or over the hip throw. More aggressive, you step deep behind their leg, use your hip and shoulder to leverage them over.
Like a judo throw, almost.
Kind of, yeah. And they briefly mention the chancery hold, controlling the head and neck up close.
So a real mix of striking and grappling. Much more than modern boxing. How do they defend against all this? Parries.
Parries were key. And the book notes how consistent they seem to be throughout history, from ancient Greek vase paintings to later manuals.
Really? Same ideas.
Broadly, yeah. For straight punches, you parry with the hand on the same side as the punch, but the opposite hand to your opponent's. So if they throw a right, you parry with your left.
Why that way?
It deflects the punch and opens up their center line for your own counter. Very efficient.
Smart. What about round punches, hooks,
Usually just lift your arm, use the forearm to block or deflect the swing.
and body shots? To the ribs, kidneys.
Pull the elbow down sharply, keep it tight to your body. The elbow becomes a shield.
Simple, direct defenses. What about kicks? You mentioned they were banned later. Were they used much before that?
The fact they got banned suggests they were used, or the book doesn't detail them extensively from the main bare-knuckle era, but points to earlier stuff.
Like what?
Low kicks, straightforward kicks, aiming below the groin usually, using the bottom of the foot or the tip. Think maybe disrupt balance, annoy, create openings rather than knockout power.
More like tactical kicks than power kicks. Okay. Now, there's a concept called giving the return. Sounds important.
Very important. It basically means counterattacking immediately after you parry, like simultaneous defense and offense.
Don't just block, hit back right away.
Exactly. Don't let them get into a rhythm, block hit, instantly regain the initiative. It's a proactive mindset, not just defending, but turning defense into offense in the same beat.
I like that. Very dynamic. Does the book give specific examples of counters and escapes?
It does, like using a left guard and then a quick right to the ribs if your opponent throws wide punches, or a right cross-counter duck slightly left and punch over their lead arm.
Okay, specific tactics.
Yeah, or a left uppercut counter against a straight punch. For escapes, they show how to get out of an inverted chancery hold explosive shove to the head and body.
Breaking the grip.
Right. They also show a back fall throw and its counter, and a back hip fall throw, and sequences from old texts like parry this, return with that, real step-by-step stuff.
Sounds very practical. But doing all this requires, well, serious toughness, right? Physically and mentally. What did they emphasize for conditioning?
4 main things the book highlights. Wind, basically cardio. Bottom, that's mental toughness, grit, taking pain.
I like that term, bottom. Really captures it.
Yeah, it does. Then strength, functional strength, not just bulk. And speed, but more about timing and accuracy than just raw hand speed.
Okay, wind, bottom, strength, speed. How do they train those?
Yeah.
Especially bottom.
Conditioning was key. Hand conditioning, obviously crucial. Strengthening hand, wrist, forearm muscles. Things like fingertip push-ups, squeezing rubber balls.
Right.
Hitting bags, though, old bags filled with barley corn were different, harder than modern ones. Toughening the bone structure through impact, gradually. They even mentioned Gene Tunney soaking his hands in brine to toughen the skin.
Brine. Wow.
Yeah.
But they warn against trying to condition the head, right?
Absolutely. Very strong warning there. Don't try to make your head tougher to punches. Bad idea.
Good advice. What about conditioning the body then? Taking body shots?
That was more about getting used to the feeling, acclimatization, learning to tense muscles like Houdini did with his abs.
Bracing for impact.
Yeah. But mostly, the book suggests it came from sparring with minimal protection. Thin MMA gloves, maybe? Just getting used to being hit, managing the pain, the adrenaline dump.
So familiarization through controlled sparring.
Yeah.
Makes sense. What about pure strength training, lifting weights?
Interestingly, no. Historical texts often warned against too much muscle bulk. Said it slowed you down, hurt endurance.
Really? Counterintuitive maybe to modern gym culture.
Right. They favored body weight stuff, Hindu push-ups, bridging for the neck and back, slow controlled squats, sea lion push-ups, those fingertip push-ups again. Focus on endurance and control.
Emotional strength again.
Exactly. And for cardio, wind, they recommended brisk walking over long-distance running, sustained pace. And sparring, of course, was crucial for everything, timing, technique, conditioning, but practiced with care, especially throws.
A very holistic, fight-specific approach. Interesting that they touch on techniques from before the main bare-knuckle era, too.
Yeah, just briefly, Nicholas Petter's book from 1674 shows a straight punch combined with a foot trap.
Oh, trap. Cool.
And Passion's work from 1659, mostly about wrestling counters, also includes things like elbow strikes and low kicks. So those moves were definitely in the European martial arts toolbox before the specific bare-knuckle rules came along.
Right, so the later rules excluded things that were already known.
Yeah.
Which brings us to the big question. How does any of this relate to self-defense today?
Yeah, the book pivots here. And it makes a powerful point. Self-defense is mostly psychological, like 80% mindset, awareness.
80%. Wow.
Yeah, then maybe 10% conditioning and only 10% actual techniques.
That really reframes things, doesn't it?
It does. They even share a story about using a simple question, asking for the time to diffuse a tense situation. Psychology over fists.
De-escalation first.
Always. And a good self-defense system, they say, needs just a few techniques. They should be instinctive, use basic tactics, work under stress, gross motor skills, not fine ones.
Because fine motor skills go out the window under stress.
Totally. Heart rate goes up, dexterity goes down. So you need simple, robust moves, and it has to fit you, your body, your mindset.
Makes sense. Train for the stress response.
Crucial. Stress inoculation through training. They also distinguish pain, a warning signal from injury, actual damage. You can often fight through pain because of adrenaline. So the emphasis is really on awareness first. Avoidance. Having a plan before something happens.
Prevention is key. But if it does kick off,
Yeah.
any specific strategies?
They mention the fence. Using open hands, palms out, to create space. It's non-threatening, but keeps distance.
Like a verbal boundary made physical.
Kind of, yeah. They touch on the preemptive strike, but only if you're genuinely facing imminent serious harm. It's a huge legal and moral decision.
Absolutely.
And very important advice. After an incident, know your rights. Don't feel pressured to make a detailed statement to police immediately if you're in shock. Calm down first.
Critical advice.
Yeah,
And training needs to be realistic.
has to be. Hit hard enough in training to know what impact feels like. Minimize telegraphing. And use scenarios.
Right, scenario training. The book lists quite a few examples.
Loads of them, like how to get up off the ground if attacked, dealing with attacks from behind, recovering if you're just covering up.
Practical stuff.
Yeah. When a preemptive strike might be justified, dealing with a possible hidden knife, creating distance, fighting when disoriented, suddenly surrounded, two attackers.
All nightmare scenarios.
Totally. Breaking for a door, group attacks, being squeezed in a crowd, the gauntlet, dealing with bystanders, using that hand fence we mentioned. It covers a lot of messy, real-world possibilities.
It really drives home how chaotic violence can be. And they recommend other books, too, for further reading on self-defense.
They do. Gavin de Becker's The Gift of Fear about intuition. Mark Animal McYoung, very direct, pragmatic stuff.
Heard of it.
Don Pentecost on knife fighting. Jeff Thompson, lots on fear, bars, real conflict. Peyton Quinn on bar brawls and adrenal stress. Good resources to go deeper.
Excellent. So a lot packed into this companion. If we were to wrap up this deep dive, what are the main things we've pulled out?
Well, first, that bare-knuckle boxing wasn't just random brawling. It's a martial art with deep European roots, going back centuries, even millennia.
Right, a real lineage.
Second, it had specific techniques honed for ungloved fighting. Precise fist formation, mobile footwork, strategic striking, plus grappling elements like throws and trips.
Things lost in modern boxing.
And many of them, yeah. Third, the conditioning was intense and holistic, focusing on endurance, wind, mental toughness, bottom, functional strength, and efficient movement. Not just looking strong, but being fight-ready.
And finally,
Even though it's historical, understanding its principles, the psychology, the need for simple techniques under stress, the importance of conditioning, the grappling aspect can offer real insights for thinking about modern self-defense. It's more than just a sport history lesson.
it definitely feels that way. It connects the past to present concerns about conflict and safety. Okay, so here's a final thought for everyone listening. How does digging into something like historical bare-knuckle boxing change your view of conflict, maybe even self-preservation today.
Yeah, what parts of this old knowledge feel relevant or surprising to you now? Is it the techniques, the conditioning, the mindset?
Something to think about. Maybe check out those recommended books or explore more European martial history. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive.